Writing for young adults is not for the faint of heart, according to Sherry Garland, who is an award-winning author of over 30 books written for children, teen, and young adults. Of all the fiction genres, the young adult category is one of the most unpredictable. Like the characters in the stories and the adolescents who read them, young adult novels bridge the space between childhood and adulthood, and the bridge is very shaky. In the book Writing Romances, a handbook by the Romance Writers of America, I find that in chapter 23, which is Writing the Young Adult Romance, Sherry Garland gives a beautiful description of what young adult fiction is. According to her, the young adult category embraces many subgenres: mystery, horror, romance, mainstream, historical, fantasy, and science fiction. The young adult genre has been around since the 1950s. Do you remember Nancy Drew and her series? Well, that was very popular back then. And in the 70s and in the 80s, that was considered the golden age for young adult romance. And this is when many publishers started producing such series as Sweet Valley High and Sweet Dreams and Cheerleaders and Wildfire. This was also the time in which I wrote my first young adult fiction called Naira, and that was a coming-of-age story set in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. These young adult fiction books that were written in the 1990s were usually squeaky clean. They had no sex scenes, no profanity, and they had happy endings or pleasant endings. These stories or novels usually evolved around friendship, cheerleading, popularity, dating, and the settings usually took place in high schools or middle schools or beaches or summer vacations, libraries, bookstores, shopping malls, any place that you would find a teenager. These stories could also take place in churches or community centers. I believe that young adult fiction should be broken down into age groups. I believe the tweens should have sweet and clean and wholesome type of storytelling. Yes, the subject matter could be discussing divorces or problems in school or even problems dealing with social media or popularity, but I think that it should be written in a way that is appropriate for the age of the reader. It is important as an author of young adult fiction to identify the age group that you are targeting. Do you want to write for girls or boys that are ages 8 to 12, which would be middle grade? Or do you want to write for the ages 9 to 13, which would be young adult? Or the older teenagers, which would be older young adult? Are you interested in writing for high schoolers? Or are you interested in writing for those children that are about to leave high school and go off to college? It is important to know your audience, and it is important to know the maturity level of the people that you're writing for. I believe that you can cover a whole host of topics, whether you write for 9-year-olds or 20-year-olds, but it is all in how you present your story and how graphic and how detailed you get. As a young adult writer, you are going to be competing with other forms of entertainment. You're going to be competing with cell phones, with television, with streaming services, with music, with video games. So when you write, you are going to have to create a story that grabs their attention immediately, and you are going to have characters that are identifiable and that the reader can relate to, and you're going to have to be current on what is going on in the world today or in the world of a teenager. In making this video, I think of some of the subjects or some of the topics that are relevant today, such as body positivity or body shaming or bullying or having breast augmentation or having a Brazilian butt lift. These are things that young women are thinking about. In addition to that, interracial dating or teen pregnancy. Or what about career choices? What do these young people want to be when they grow up? Are they anxious and nervous about leaving young adulthood and going to adulthood? These are all topics that can be entertaining and exciting for your young reader. You might even consider getting a little political. You might want to touch on some of the wars that are going on in the world, or you may want to talk about race relations in the world. However, if you do choose to write about these topics or incorporate these topics in your story, do so in a way that will not traumatize your young reader. As an African American writer, I like to include diversity in my stories. I like to have my world, my literary world, reflect the real world in which I live in. If you are struggling to find your next leading lady, then you may want to look at some of the younger members in your family, or maybe your neighbor's children, or maybe there is a particular child that you notice on your way to work or on your way home. Keep your eyes open because you can find characters wherever you look. I know for me, I saw a young girl, an Asian girl, maybe 15, and she was roller skating. And I thought, she should be in one of my books. She looks very interesting, and I like the fact that she's very active. So always keep your eyes open and always look for your next character because they could just be a glance away. Here are a few tips that may help you hook your reader. 1, open your story with a hook, with action, with a problem, with something that can draw your reader in immediately. 2, end each chapter with a cliffhanger. 3, make your dialogue believable and avoid slang and avoid profanity. 4, avoid too much description and too much narrative. You want your book or your story to move fast. And the best way to do that is to use dialogue and to replace your adjectives and adverbs with strong verbs. 5, avoid lengthy flashbacks. 6, use all 5 senses in telling your story. 7, don't preach to your reader. 8, let the protagonist solve her own problems. Don't let an adult come in and fix everything for her. 9, do not include explicit sex scenes. And 10, this is the final one. Develop conflict and tension. Give the protagonist problems outside of her romantic love interests. You can also use your own personal experiences as a source of material. Close your eyes and think back to when you were 13 or 14 years old. What were some of the things that you were dealing with? What were some of the struggles that you were going through? What were some of the triumphs and some of the happy times? What about the first time you had a crush on a person? What was that like? Can you recall those feelings, that emotion? Were you anxious? Were you nervous? Were you shy? Tap into your own experiences and use that as a source of material. This is Elizabeth Griffin, the Black Romance Writer, and thank you very much for joining me on my platform. And until next time, happy writing.